Kiss me like you mean it. The words hit Claire Bennett so unexpectedly that for a moment she forgot the sting of humiliation burning behind her eyes. The laughter from the ballroom drifted through the open glass doors like distant static, mixed with the soft notes of a jazz band and the clinking of crystal glasses. Chicago's skyline shimmered beyond the rooftop terrace, millions of lights stretching into the cold spring night. Just 10 minutes earlier, Claire had been standing inside the Grand Wellington Hotel pretending everything was fine. Pretending she hadn't just watched her ex-boyfriend introduce his fiancée to a room full of mutual friends. Pretending she hadn't heard someone whisper, "That's Claire, the single mom he used to date." Pretending her heart wasn't breaking all over again. She tightened her grip around the stem of her untouched champagne glass until her knuckles turned pale. At 30 years old, Claire thought she had learned how to handle disappointment. Life had given her plenty of practice, raising 5-year-old Lily alone, working long hours as an administrative coordinator, stretching every paycheck until it practically begged for mercy, smiling through exhaustion because her daughter deserved a mother who still believed tomorrow could be better. But tonight felt different. Tonight reminded her of every door that had closed in her face, every promise that had fallen apart, every time someone decided she wasn't enough. "You look like you're considering throwing that glass into Lake Michigan." The voice came from beside her. Calm, amused, unexpectedly warm. Claire turned. The man standing near the railing looked completely out of place and somehow perfectly comfortable at the same time. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him with effortless precision. The city lights reflected faintly in his blue eyes. Yet there was nothing arrogant about him. No attempt to impress. No obvious need for attention. He simply stood there as if he'd wandered into her sadness by accident. "I wasn't considering it," Claire replied quietly. "Good." He nodded toward the ballroom. "Those glasses are probably expensive." Despite herself, she laughed. A small laugh. The first genuine one she'd managed all evening. "You have a strange way of cheering people up. It's worked once tonight." His smile deepened slightly. For a moment neither spoke. The wind lifted a strand of Claire's blonde hair across her face. Somewhere below, traffic moved through the city like rivers of red and white light. The man leaned lightly against the railing. "Wedding?" he asked. Claire glanced back toward the ballroom. "Something like that." "You don't seem thrilled." "That's because my ex is inside celebrating his engagement." The confession escaped before she could stop it. She immediately regretted it. Why was she telling a stranger this? The man didn't react with pity. Didn't offer empty encouragement. He simply listened. "That sounds difficult." "It shouldn't be." Claire stared at the skyline. "It's been over for years. We weren't right for each other. I know that. But seeing someone move on so easily." She swallowed. "It makes you wonder what was wrong with you." His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for her to notice. "Nothing." The answer came immediately, firmly. "You don't know me." "I know enough." Claire looked away. If he kept being kind, she might cry. And she refused to cry tonight. Behind them, the terrace door opened. Voices spilled outside. Claire recognized one instantly. Her stomach dropped. Tyler. Her ex-boyfriend stepped onto the terrace with 2 friends beside him. The moment his eyes landed on Claire, a familiar smugness crossed his face. Claire felt every muscle tighten. She knew that look. Tyler wasn't finished embarrassing her. He started walking toward them. Slowly, confidently, as if he owned the evening. As if he still enjoyed reminding her what she'd lost. "Well," Tyler called. "Didn't expect to find you hiding out here." Claire's pulse quickened. The stranger beside her remained perfectly still. Tyler glanced at him and smirked. "Making new friends already?" Claire felt heat rush into her face. "Not again. Not tonight." Tyler took another step closer. "You know, Claire always hated being alone." Before she could respond, the stranger moved slightly closer. Not possessively. Not dramatically, just enough to create a quiet wall between her and the moment she desperately wanted to escape. Then he leaned toward her. His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear it. Calm, certain, almost playful. "Kiss me like you mean it." For a second, the entire city seemed to fall silent around her. Claire stared at him, convinced she had misheard. The city lights blurred for a second as her pulse pounded in her ears. Tyler was only a few feet away now, his friends lingering behind him with the kind of curiosity people reserved for situations they expected to become uncomfortable. Claire knew that look too. She had been the subject of it before. The divorced mother. The woman left behind. The one everyone politely felt sorry for. The stranger beside her seemed completely unaffected by any of it. His expression remained calm, almost relaxed, as though he had already decided how the next 60 seconds would end. Tyler glanced between them and laughed softly. Wow, that was fast. The remark landed exactly the way he intended. Claire felt humiliation rising again. Then she looked at the stranger. For some reason, she saw no judgment in his eyes. No pressure. Only an unexpected offer of escape. A lifeline disguised as confidence. Before she could overthink it, she stepped slightly closer. The stranger lowered his head just enough for Tyler to see them sharing a private moment. Nothing dramatic. Nothing inappropriate. Just enough to make it clear that Claire was not standing alone tonight. Tyler's smile faltered. It was subtle, but Claire noticed. For the first time all evening, she watched uncertainty replace certainty on his face. Well, Tyler said after a moment, forcing a laugh. Looks like you are doing just fine. I am, Claire replied. To her surprise, she meant it. Tyler nodded stiffly before turning away. His friends followed him back toward the ballroom. Within seconds, they disappeared through the glass doors. The silence that followed felt different. Lighter somehow. Claire released a breath she had not realized she had been holding. The stranger stepped back immediately, restoring the space between them. The gesture struck her. Most people would have lingered in the awkwardness. He simply respected it. Thank you, she said quietly. You did not have to do that. You look like you could use a teammate. Claire laughed again. A real laugh this time. Is that what that was? Temporary teamwork. He smiled. No contracts involved. The tension slowly drained from her shoulders. For the first time that night, she felt like herself again. They moved toward the railing overlooking the city. Traffic flowed below in glowing ribbons of white and red. A ferry crossed the dark water in the distance. Somewhere inside the hotel, the band started a slower song. The stranger folded his hands in front of him. Tell me something good, he said. Claire blinked. Something good. Everyone talks about their problems. Tell me something worth smiling about. She thought for a moment. Surprisingly, the answer came immediately. My daughter. His expression softened. How old? 5. What is her name? Lily. The smile that appeared on Claire's face happened automatically. She is obsessed with drawing. Every room in our apartment is covered in crayons, markers, glitter, and things I am still finding weeks later. Sounds expensive. It is. Claire laughed. Last month she decided our refrigerator needed a rainbow. Did it? According to her, absolutely. The stranger chuckled quietly. The sound was warm and genuine. I like her already. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. After a few taps, she showed him a picture. Lily sat cross-legged on a living room rug surrounded by coloring books, her blonde curls escaping from a messy ponytail while she proudly held up a drawing. The stranger studied the photo longer than Claire expected. Something changed in his eyes. Not sadness exactly. Something deeper. Something thoughtful. She looks happy, he said. She is. Claire swallowed. I try really hard to make sure she stays that way. The stranger nodded slowly. His gaze lingered on the picture before drifting toward the skyline. For a brief moment, he looked like a man remembering something he had not thought about in years. Then the wind caught a folded piece of paper, sticking out of Claire's purse. It slipped free and fluttered onto the terrace floor. The stranger bent down before she could react. He picked it up carefully. It was one of Lily's drawings. A simple picture made with bright crayons. A little girl holding hands with her mother beneath a yellow sun. Above them, written in uneven 5-year-old handwriting, were words that made the stranger freeze for just a second. Claire did not notice the change in his expression as he stared at the drawing. She only noticed how unusually quiet he became before slowly handing it back. Claire slipped the drawing back into her purse and smiled, unaware of the effect it had just had on him. The wind carried the distant sound of laughter from the ballroom, while the city sparkled beneath them. For several seconds, the stranger remained unusually quiet. His eyes drifted toward the water before returning to her. Your daughter made that? He asked. Every line. Claire laughed softly. She takes her artwork very seriously. I can tell. Something thoughtful lingered in his voice. Children usually say exactly what they mean. That is definitely Lily. Claire shook her head affectionately. She once told a grocery store manager that his mustache looked like a sleeping squirrel. The stranger laughed. A genuine laugh this time. the kind that transformed his entire face. Claire realized she had spent nearly an hour talking to a man whose name she did not even know. Oddly, that felt refreshing. There were no expectations here. No office politics. No judgment about her being a single mother. No awkward sympathy. Just a conversation between two strangers beneath the lights of Chicago. "What about you?" she asked. "Do you have children?" A shadow crossed his expression so briefly, she almost missed it. "No." The answer came gently. Life took a different path. Claire nodded. She sensed there was more to the story, but chose not to push. Some silences deserved respect. The ballroom doors opened again behind them. A wedding coordinator stepped onto the terrace carrying a clipboard and scanning the crowd. "There you are," she called toward the stranger. "People have been looking for you." Claire noticed the faintest hint of amusement appear in his eyes. "That sounds ominous." "You have no idea." The coordinator sighed dramatically before disappearing back inside. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Popular? Not particularly. Important." His smile widened. "Depends who you ask." Before she could press further, her phone vibrated inside her purse. The screen lit up with a picture of a smiling little girl missing one front tooth. Claire's entire expression softened instantly. "That would be Lily." She answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." The excited voice on the other end burst through the speaker loud enough for both of them to hear. "Mommy, did you have fun at the fancy party?" Claire smiled. "I am having fun. Did you eat cake?" "Not yet." "You should eat cake." The stranger looked away, hiding another smile. "That is excellent advice," Claire said. "I know," Lily replied confidently. "Grandma says I give good advice." Claire laughed. "How is Grandma?" "She is asleep on the couch." "Already?" She said she was watching a movie, but she fell asleep before the dog finished barking. The stranger chuckled quietly beside her. Lily continued talking about school, crayons, and a classmate who had traded half a peanut butter sandwich for a sticker. Claire listened patiently, completely absorbed. When the call finally ended, she stared at the screen for a moment before slipping the phone away. "She sounds amazing," the stranger said. "She is." Claire's eyes shined with pride. "She is the best thing that ever happened to me." He nodded slowly. "I believe that." Another comfortable silence settled between them. Somewhere inside the hotel, applause erupted. The reception was entering another phase of the evening. Claire glanced at the time and sighed. It was later than she realized. Tomorrow was Sunday, then Monday, then another week of deadlines, meetings, and bills waiting on the kitchen counter. Reality always returned eventually. "I should probably go." The words surprised her more than him. For some reason, she was reluctant to leave. The stranger seemed equally thoughtful. "Probably." Neither moved immediately. Finally, Claire extended her hand. "Thank you for helping me survive tonight." He looked at her hand for a moment before shaking it. His grip was warm and steady. "You survived it yourself." Something passed through his eyes then. Recognition, perhaps. Admiration. Or maybe simply kindness. Claire could not tell. What she did know was that she felt lighter than she had when she arrived. As she turned toward the ballroom doors, the stranger called after her. "Claire." She looked back. "Yes." For a brief moment, he seemed as though he wanted to say something important. Instead, he simply smiled. "Tell Lily the refrigerator rainbow was a masterpiece." Claire laughed as she walked away. What she did not see was the way he stood watching until she disappeared into the crowd, nor the way his gaze briefly lowered to the memory of a crayon drawing and the uneven words written above it. Words he could not seem to forget. Sunday morning arrived with the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the blinds of Claire Bennett's small apartment. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen while Lily sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by markers and construction paper. Claire watched her daughter carefully color a giant purple butterfly while cartoons played quietly in the background. Normally, Sundays helped her reset before another workweek. This morning felt different. She found herself thinking about a stranger whose name she had never learned. It was ridiculous. She knew almost nothing about him. Yet his calm voice kept returning to her thoughts. The way he listened. The way he never treated her like someone who needed saving. Most people saw a struggling single mother and immediately offered sympathy. He had offered respect. "Mommy." Lily looked up from her drawing. "Why are you smiling at the toaster?" Claire blinked. "I was not smiling at the toaster." "You were." Lily pointed dramatically. "You had the smile." "What smile?" "The happy one." Claire laughed and shook her head. "Children noticed everything. Maybe I was thinking about a nice conversation. Lily narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Was it with a boy? A man? That means yes. Claire surrendered with a laugh. The rest of the day passed. Quickly. Laundry. Grocery shopping. Meal prep for the week. The familiar rhythm of ordinary life. By Sunday evening, reality had returned completely. Bills waited on the kitchen counter. Her work laptop sat beside them. Monday morning would arrive whether she felt ready or not. Across the city, in a penthouse office overlooking Chicago, the stranger sat alone at a conference table covered with reports. The room was silent except for the occasional hum of traffic far below. A leather folder rested open before him, untouched for nearly 10 minutes. Instead of reading the documents, his attention remained fixed on a small piece of paper lying beside them. A drawing. A copy he had quietly recreated from memory that morning. A little girl. A mother. A yellow sun. And beneath them, the uneven words written by a child. Dear God, please send my mommy someone who will not leave. He stared at the sentence again, then closed his eyes. Memories he rarely visited surfaced without permission. His own childhood. Empty promises. Adults who came and went. The feeling of waiting for someone who never returned. A knock interrupted the silence. His assistant stepped inside carrying a tablet. Everything is ready for tomorrow. He nodded. Good. The announcement begins at 9 sharp. Understood. She hesitated. The board is excited to finally meet their new chief executive officer in person. A faint smile appeared. I imagine they are. After she left, he looked out at the skyline. Tomorrow would be important. New leadership. New responsibilities. New expectations. Yet somehow the board meeting was not what occupied his thoughts. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. The elevators inside Harper Financial moved continuously as employees streamed into the downtown office building carrying coffee cups and laptop bags. Excitement buzzed through every department. The company was finally meeting the executive hired to lead its next chapter. Claire stepped out of the elevator balancing a travel mug and a stack of reports. Her coworker Jenna immediately intercepted her. Please tell me you remembered. Claire frowned. Remembered what? Jenna stared at her. The CEO presentation. Claire groaned. That is today? In 30 minutes. Jenna lowered her voice dramatically. Rumor says he turned around 3 companies before he turned 40. Claire headed toward her desk. Wonderful. And supposedly he is impossible to impress. Even better. Around them, conversations buzzed with speculation. Nobody seemed to know much about the incoming executive. Only that he had an extraordinary reputation and preferred staying out of the public spotlight. Claire focused on organizing her reports. New CEOs came and went. She had deadlines to worry about. Payroll reviews. Scheduling conflicts. Budget summaries. Real life. At precisely 8:55, employees began filling the main conference room. The atmosphere felt strangely electric. Claire slipped into a seat near the back and opened her notebook. The room gradually quieted. The chairman stepped to the front. Thank you all for coming. Dozens of faces turned forward. Today marks an important moment for this company. Claire glanced at the clock. 9 o'clock. Right on schedule. The conference room doors opened. Footsteps echoed across the polished floor. Claire looked up casually, then froze. Her heartbeat stopped for one impossible second. The man walking toward the front of the room was the same stranger from the rooftop terrace. The same calm blue eyes. The same effortless confidence. The same man who had spent an evening listening to stories about Lily beneath the Chicago skyline. He stopped beside the chairman and looked out across the room. His gaze moved through hundreds of employees, then found her instantly. Recognition flashed between them. And for the first time since Saturday night, Claire learned exactly who he was. Claire forgot how to breathe. The conference room around her seemed to blur into a distant haze of suits, laptops, and polished wood. Only one thing remained perfectly clear. The stranger from the rooftop terrace was standing at the front of the room. He was not a wedding guest. He was not an anonymous man escaping a party. He was not simply someone who had listened while she talked about Lily. He was the new chief executive officer of Harper Financial. The chairman smiled proudly beside him. Please join me in welcoming Ethan Cole. Applause erupted throughout the room. Employees straightened in their seats. Several people exchanged impressed glances. Claire barely heard any of it. Ethan. She finally knew his name. Ethan Cole stepped forward with the same calm confidence she remembered from Saturday night. The room quieted almost immediately. Thank you, he said. His voice carried easily across the room. I know leadership transitions create uncertainty. My goal is simple. I want to build a company where people are respected, challenged, and given opportunities to succeed. Claire stared at her notebook without seeing it. Part of her wanted to disappear beneath the conference table. Another part could not stop replaying every conversation they had shared. Had he known who she was? Had he recognized the company name when she mentioned work? Why had he never said anything? Ethan continued speaking about growth, innovation, and teamwork. Employees listened attentively. Claire noticed something different compared to executives she had worked under before. He spoke less about profits and more about people, less about authority and more about responsibility. The room responded to it. By the time the meeting ended, many employees looked genuinely encouraged. Claire only felt confused. As people stood and gathered their belongings, Jenna grabbed her arm. Can you believe that? Claire forced herself to blink. Believe what? The new CEO. Jenna lowered her voice dramatically. That man looks like he belongs on a magazine cover. Claire nearly choked on a laugh. You noticed that? Everyone noticed that. Jenna glanced toward the front of the room. And apparently he is worth hundreds of millions. Wonderful. The situation somehow became even more complicated. Employees slowly filed toward the exits. Claire focused on packing her notebook as quickly as possible. If she left now, she could avoid an awkward conversation. Unfortunately, fate appeared to have different plans. Ms. Bennett. Claire froze. The voice belonged to Ethan's assistant. A polished woman carrying a tablet approached her directly. Mr. Cole would like a word. Every nearby employee immediately pretended not to be listening. Claire could practically feel curiosity spreading across the room. Jenna's eyes widened to impossible proportions. You know the CEO? Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then stood. Apparently. A few minutes later, she found herself standing inside a private conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. The city looked impossibly far below. Ethan stood near the glass, reviewing a document. When the door closed behind her, he looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. Then a familiar smile appeared. Good morning, Claire. The simple greeting somehow made the entire situation even more surreal. You are the CEO. Ethan nodded. That appears to be the rumor. Claire folded her arms. You forgot to mention that Saturday night. You never asked. Despite herself, she laughed. Then immediately stopped. You knew I worked here. I figured it out during our conversation. And you still did not tell me. Ethan considered that carefully. Would our conversation have been the same if I had? Claire opened her mouth to answer. Nothing came out. Because deep down, she knew the truth. No, it would not have been. She would have become cautious. Formal. Nervous. The easy honesty of that evening would have disappeared. Ethan seemed to read the realization in her face. I liked meeting the real you, he said quietly. Not the version people become when they think they are talking to a billionaire. The room fell silent. Claire looked away first. Something about his honesty made her uncomfortable in the best possible way. Ethan walked to the conference table and picked up a folder. There is another reason I asked you here. Claire's stomach tightened. Work. Of course. Reality had returned. Ethan slid the folder across the table. I would like you to join a special project team. Claire stared down at the documents. Then back at him. Why me? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. Because I think you are capable of more than your current position allows. For the second time since meeting him, Claire found herself completely speechless. Claire stared at the folder. Long after Ethan finished speaking. The pages contained projections, timelines, department analyses, and the outline of a company-wide modernization initiative. It was the kind of project usually reserved for senior managers, not someone in her position. She looked up slowly. There are people with more experience. Ethan leaned lightly against the conference table. There are people with more titles. That is not the same thing. Not always. Claire glanced back at the folder. A mixture of pride and anxiety twisted together in her chest. For years she had worked quietly behind the scenes, solving problems, organizing chaos, making sure everyone else succeeded. Nobody had ever looked at her and seen leadership potential. Nobody except the man standing across from her. That realization made her unexpectedly nervous. I need time to think about it, she said. Ethan nodded immediately. Take all the time you need. There was no pressure in his voice. No expectation. Just respect. Somehow that made the offer even harder to refuse. The rest of Monday passed in a blur. Word spread quickly that the new CEO had personally requested a meeting with Claire Bennett. By lunch, half the office seemed aware of it. Curious glances followed her through the hallways. Jenna practically tackled her near the break room. What happened? Claire grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator. Nothing happened. The CEO called you into a private meeting. Jenna folded her arms. That is absolutely something. Claire laughed despite herself. It was work-related. Do you know how many people would trade their parking spot for 5 minutes of private access to that man? Most people do not have parking spots. You are avoiding the question. Claire changed the subject so quickly that Jenna groaned in frustration. By late afternoon, Claire finally escaped the office and drove across the city toward Lily's elementary school. The familiar routine grounded her. Children spilled through the front doors carrying backpacks almost as large as they were. Parents gathered near the sidewalk. Teachers waved goodbye. Normal life. Real life. Lily spotted her immediately. Mommy. Claire barely had time to kneel before her daughter launched herself into a hug. How was school? Amazing. That sounds serious. Lily nodded dramatically. We learned about clouds. Claire smiled. Life-changing information. Very life-changing. They walked hand in hand toward the parking lot. Halfway there, Lily looked up suddenly. Did the fancy party man ever call? Claire nearly stumbled. What? The nice man. Lily shrugged. The one Grandma said you talked about all morning. Claire made a mental note to have a conversation with her mother later. No, sweetheart. Maybe he is shy. Claire laughed all the way to the car. That evening, after homework, dinner, and bath time, Lily disappeared into her room to work on another art project. Claire sat at the kitchen table reviewing the project folder Ethan had given her. The deeper she read, the more she realized how important the initiative was. The company needed new systems, better communication, more efficient processes. Ideas immediately started forming in her mind. Possible solutions, potential improvements. She grabbed a pen and began making notes. 1 hour became 2. Before she noticed, the apartment had gone completely quiet. A small voice interrupted her concentration. Mommy. Claire looked up. Lily stood in the hallway holding a stuffed rabbit. You missed bedtime. Claire checked the clock and gasped. I did. Lily walked over and climbed onto her lap. You are thinking very hard. I guess I am. Lily studied the papers spread across the table. Is it important? Claire considered the question. Then she nodded. Maybe. Lily thought about that for a moment before placing a small hand over Claire's. You always tell me to try things that scare me. The words landed with surprising force. Claire stared at her daughter. When did I say that? A lot. Lily yawned. Usually when I do not want to do something. Claire wrapped her arms around her and smiled. Children really did say exactly what they meant. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep, Claire returned to the kitchen table. She looked out the window at the city lights beyond the glass. Then she reached for her phone. Her finger hovered over Ethan's number printed at the bottom of the folder. For several seconds, she hesitated. Finally, she typed a short message. I would like to accept the project. The reply arrived less than a minute later. I was hoping you would. Tuesday morning began with rain tapping softly against the windows of Harper Financial. Gray clouds hung low over Chicago, turning the skyline into a watercolor blur. Claire arrived 20 minutes early carrying a notebook filled with ideas she had written long after midnight. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed at work. Excitement. The special project team occupied a conference room on the 22nd floor. When Claire stepped inside, conversations paused briefly. Most of the participants were senior managers with impressive titles and years of experience. Claire instantly felt out of place. One man in particular made no effort to hide his skepticism. Richard Lawson, director of operations, glanced at her company badge before returning to his laptop. Administrative coordinator, he said quietly enough to sound polite and loudly enough for everyone to hear. Interesting selection. Claire felt the familiar sting of being underestimated. Before she could respond, Ethan entered the room. The atmosphere changed immediately. Discussion stopped. Chairs straightened. Attention shifted. Ethan greeted everyone professionally before taking his seat at the head of the table. His gaze briefly met Claire's. Nothing more than a simple acknowledgement. Yet somehow it steadied her nerves. The meeting began. Department leaders presented reports. Charts filled the screens. Projections covered entire walls. Claire listened carefully, taking notes while patterns slowly emerged. Inefficiencies, communication gaps, redundant procedures, problems hidden beneath layers of routine. 2 hours later, Richard presented a proposal that immediately drew approval from several executives. The plan looked impressive on paper. Large savings, faster implementation, strong numbers. Ethan listened without interruption. Then he asked a simple question. What impact will this have on client support teams? The room grew quiet. Richard hesitated. Minimal. Claire frowned. Something about the answer felt wrong. She quickly reviewed the figures in her notes. Her stomach tightened. The numbers did not match. She checked again, then a third time. The problem remained. Ethan's attention moved around the room. Any concerns? Silence followed. Senior managers avoided eye contact. Nobody wanted to challenge the proposal. Claire stared at her notebook. Her heart pounded. This was not her place. These were executives, experts, people with careers much larger than hers. Then she remembered something Lily had said. You always tell me to try things that scare me. Claire slowly raised her hand. Several heads turned. Richard looked mildly annoyed. Ethan simply nodded. Go ahead. Claire swallowed. I think there may be an issue with the implementation timeline. The room became very still. Richard folded his arms. What kind of issue? Claire stood and walked toward the screen. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. The projected savings assumed client support software will transition in 90 days. She pointed to one section of the report. But according to the vendor schedule, full integration requires at least 150 days. Richard frowned. That cannot be correct. Claire opened another document. I called the vendor yesterday while reviewing the materials. Several executives exchanged surprised looks. Their implementation director confirmed it. Silence spread across the room. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching carefully. Claire continued. The more she explained, the more confident she became. By the time she finished, the flaw was impossible to ignore. Richard's proposal would create significant delays and cost the company millions. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Ethan nodded once. Excellent catch. The simple praise hit Claire harder than she expected. Around the table, executives began revising assumptions and discussing alternatives. The meeting shifted direction entirely. As discussions resumed, Ethan remained mostly silent. Yet Claire noticed something. Every time she contributed an idea, he listened with complete attention. Not because of who she was, because of what she had to say. When the meeting finally ended, people filed out carrying updated reports and new assignments. Richard approached her near the doorway. Claire prepared herself for criticism. Instead, he extended his hand. Good work. She blinked. Thank you. Richard gave a reluctant smile. You saved us from a very expensive mistake. After he left, Claire gathered her notes and headed toward the elevator. What she did not know was that several floors above, Ethan stood alone in his office watching the rain slide down the glass. On his desk rested a photograph his assistant had found among project materials earlier that morning. A photograph that had accidentally fallen from Claire's folder. It showed a little girl with blonde curls proudly holding up a colorful drawing. Ethan picked up the picture carefully. Then he smiled. The following Friday arrived faster than Claire expected. The project team had spent 4 exhausting days rebuilding proposals, revising timelines, and solving problems that had existed long before Ethan joined the company. For the first time in years, Claire felt intellectually challenged every single day. It was exhilarating. It was terrifying. And it was making her realize how much she had underestimated herself. Late that afternoon, as employees prepared for the weekend, Claire was reviewing project notes when her phone buzzed. The screen displayed the name of Lily's school. Her heart immediately tightened. Schools rarely called parents at 4:30 on a Friday for ordinary reasons. Claire answered instantly. Hello. The cheerful voice of Lily's teacher greeted her. Relief washed through Claire. Mrs. Bennett, I just wanted to remind you about Family Day on Wednesday. Claire froze. Family Day? The words hit her like a dropped weight. She had completely forgotten. The teacher continued. The children are very excited. Each student will have a special guest participate in classroom activities. Claire forced a smile into her voice. Of course. Thank you for reminding me. After ending the call, she stared at her calendar. Her stomach sank. Wednesday was impossible. 3 major presentations. Executive. Reviews. Client meetings. The most important project deadline of her career. She closed her eyes. Every parent eventually faced moments like this. The collision between responsibility and guilt. Between providing for a child and being present for them. That evening, Lily greeted her at the apartment door holding a colorful flyer decorated with stars and balloons. 5 more days, she announced. Claire smiled. You are excited. Everybody's families are coming. Lily bounced on her toes. We get to build model rockets and eat cupcakes and show our classrooms. Claire knelt beside her. That sounds amazing. Lily nodded enthusiastically. You are coming, right? The question landed softly. Yet Claire felt it all the way to her heart. She hesitated for half a second too long. Lily noticed immediately. Children always did. You have work. It was not an accusation, just an observation. Claire wrapped an arm around her daughter. I'm trying to figure it out. Lily nodded quietly. Okay. Then she smiled and ran off toward her room. But the excitement in her voice had dimmed just enough for Claire to hear it. Across the city, Ethan sat alone in his office reviewing project reports. The building had mostly emptied for the weekend. The skyline glowed beyond the glass as evening settled over Chicago. His attention drifted toward a note attached to one of Claire's files. Family Day. Elementary school activity schedule. He had noticed it accidentally while reviewing project timelines. The date immediately stood out. Wednesday, the same day as the executive presentations. Ethan leaned back slowly. He remembered the disappointment on children's faces when adults failed to appear. Some memories never left completely. Monday and Tuesday passed in a blur of preparation. Every department seemed to need something from Claire. Every hour brought another meeting, another deadline, another complication. By Tuesday evening, reality became impossible to ignore. There was no way she could attend Family Day. She sat at the kitchen table struggling to find the right words. Lily colored quietly nearby. Finally, Claire spoke. Sweetheart. Lily looked up. Claire's chest tightened. I need to tell you something. The little girl studied her mother's face for only a second before understanding. The crayons stopped moving. You cannot come. Claire nodded. I am so sorry. Lily looked down at the drawing in front of her. For several moments, she said nothing. The silence hurt more than tears would have. Finally, she forced a brave smile that looked far too grown-up for a 6-year-old. It is okay. Claire reached for her hand. Lily, it is okay, Mommy. Her voice remained gentle. I know you have to work. That night, long after Lily fell asleep, Claire sat alone by the window staring at the city lights. The guilt felt unbearable. What she did not know was that less than 10 miles away, Ethan Cole was looking at the exact same skyline while making a decision that would change Wednesday forever. Wednesday morning arrived bright and clear. Sunlight poured through the windows of Lily's classroom, while colorful paper stars hung from the ceiling. Children rushed excitedly between activity tables, proudly introducing parents, grandparents, and relatives to teachers and classmates. Lily sat quietly at her desk, twisting the sleeve of her sweater around one finger. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the classroom door. Hope is a strange thing. Even after disappointment, it keeps looking toward the entrance. Across downtown Chicago, the executive presentation was already underway. Department leaders filled the conference room. Charts glowed across giant screens. Questions moved rapidly from one topic to the next. Claire sat near the front reviewing notes she had spent weeks preparing. She looked professional, focused, composed, but part of her mind remained somewhere else entirely. Every time she glanced at the clock, guilt tightened inside her chest. At 10:15, her phone vibrated silently beneath the conference table. A message appeared from her mother. Lily is being brave. Claire stared at the screen for several seconds before locking it again. The words hurt more than she expected. Meanwhile, back at the school, Family Day activities continued. Children built model rockets, decorated picture frames, shared stories about their families. Lily participated politely, but her smile never fully reached her eyes. During a break, she wandered toward the classroom window. Outside, cars moved through the parking lot beneath a bright blue sky. Then she noticed a black sedan pulling into an empty space. A tall man stepped out wearing a navy suit. Lily frowned. Something about him looked familiar. Minutes later, the classroom door opened. Conversations paused. Parents looked up. The teacher smiled in surprise. Can I help you? The man nodded politely. I hope so. Then his eyes found Lily. Recognition lit up her face instantly. Fancy party man. The entire classroom turned toward her. Ethan smiled. Hello, Lily. For a second, she simply stared. Then she ran across the room. Ethan knelt just in time to catch a very enthusiastic hug. Laughter spread through the classroom. "What are you doing here?" Lily asked. Ethan glanced around dramatically. "I heard there were model rockets." The teacher approached, still looking confused. Ethan extended a hand. "Ethan Cole. I am a friend of Lily's mother." Across the city, Claire's presentation finally concluded. Applause filled the room. Weeks of work had paid off. The proposal was approved unanimously. Senior executives congratulated the project team. Ethan's assistant quietly approached Claire. "Mr. Cole asked me to give you this." She handed over a small envelope. Confused, Claire opened it immediately. Inside was a single photograph. Lily stood beside a half-finished model rocket, laughing. Next to her stood Ethan. On the back, written in neat handwriting, were 6 simple words. "Nobody should miss Family Day." Claire's eyes filled instantly. 30 minutes later, she arrived at the school, nearly breathless. She hurried through the hallway and stopped outside Lily's classroom. Through the open doorway, she saw them. Lily sat at a table covered in markers and stickers. Ethan sat beside her, helping decorate a cardboard rocket. Both were laughing about something completely serious in the way only children can be serious. Claire stood frozen for a moment, watching, taking it in, feeling something she had not expected. Relief, gratitude, hope. Ethan looked up first. Their eyes met across the room. No words were needed. Claire understood immediately. He had rearranged an executive schedule worth millions of dollars because a little girl deserved someone in the audience. Lily spotted her a second later. "Mommy." She raced across the room and wrapped both arms around Claire. "You came." Claire held her tightly. "I did." Then Lily grabbed her hand and pulled her toward Ethan. "Look what we built." Together they admired the slightly crooked rocket covered in glitter and stars. It was not perfect. Neither was life. But somehow that made it more beautiful. Later that afternoon, as families began leaving, Ethan walked with Claire and Lily toward the parking lot. The sun hung low above the city skyline. Lily skipped several feet ahead, chasing her own shadow. Claire glanced toward Ethan. "Thank you." He shook his head gently. "She did all the hard work." Claire smiled. Then she looked at her daughter, the little girl who once wrote a prayer in crayon asking for someone who would stay. For a moment, Ethan followed her gaze. Quiet understanding passed between them. Neither rushed to define it. Some things deserve time. Ahead of them, Lily turned around and waved excitedly. "Come on. We are falling behind." Ethan laughed. Claire laughed too. And for the first time in a very long time, the future no longer felt like something she had to survive. It felt like something she could look forward to.